Hello, my friends, and welcome to the third in our four-part May 2023 Blissipline, where we are learning about applying the capacity to choose from love rather than fear. Okay? And I thought I'd start by just showing you my kitty who's lying there so incredibly adorably. Her name is Joy, and she's part of my big part of my Blissipline. And then there's another kitty here. This is Aramis. And he is too in his own way. He's the difficult kitty who bites me and scratches me, but he was very traumatized, and he gets to live here. And it makes me happy that he has a place to live. So, even though he's a jerk to me sometimes. Look at her, she's so cute. So when I'm choosing from love rather than fear, I take the time to show you my kitty. When I'm choosing from fear, I'm like, ooh, that's not very professional, or some nonsense like that. And I limit my joy. So Blissipline, choosing from love or fear, is largely about reconnecting with our joy. And even more than that, or parallel to that, not sure if one is more than the other, it's about reconnecting to our sovereignty. So I, being the boss of me, get to decide if I show you my kitty. And you, being the boss of you, get to decide if you want to watch videos where someone wastes your time showing you kitties, you see, or uses your time. And you see, in this way, we actually can create space for ourselves to be as we are and let others create space for themselves to be as they are. We are in that moment creating space for them to be as they are by simply allowing them to have their preferences. And so the people who don't like me will go be in another group. And so Blissipline, we connect to our own bliss. We connect to our own preferences. We connect to our joy. And the way we do that is reconnect to our own sovereignty. Our own sovereignty. I'm the boss of me. I get to say how I do it. You're the boss of you. You get to say how you do things. Okay? So now we're going to bring this whole love or fear question to play on a very challenging topic for many people, which is work and money. And I decided to do these together because for many people, they're absolutely connected. And they're not for everyone, but for many people, they are. And even if you don't particularly have trouble with one, you might have trouble with the other or both. And almost everybody seems to have some challenge with one or the other of these. And so if you don't, hooray, and feel free to skip this video or comment below and tell us how you've made it work. So the main thing that we must remember, though, is that Blissipline is individual. Blissipline is highly individual, highly, completely unique. It is not even highly, it's 100% absolutely individual, unique. Your Blissipline is yours. And part of sovereignty is honoring our own preferences. Say, it's just how I like it. Now, since many of us have been really conditioned to be, you could call it people-pleasing, but it's actually a fear-based response. It's not really about pleasing them. It's about protecting yourselves from getting attacked by them, honestly, if we're going to be real. So that's a fear-based response. And many of us have been conditioned that way. We don't actually know that well what we prefer. And so there's a lot of work behind this getting into place. And I'll just remind you of something I've been saying lately, if you haven't heard it, or if you have, my beautiful friend Dave Keneally, who I presented I went to his Sangha and presented a couple weeks ago. Maybe you saw that. We were chit-chatting about this and that, putting together shared programs or whatever. And he said, I think it takes about 10 years. And in the context of what he was saying, I just wasn't sure what he was talking about. And I said, what takes 10 years? And he paused for a minute. And then he said, everything. And I thought, yeah, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. It takes what it takes. So this is an ongoing process. Blissipline is not something you do today and then you stop doing tomorrow, any more than eating is something you do today and then stop doing tomorrow. And just as eating is something you must do pretty much every day of your life, if you want to have a good life, you want, therefore, it to be pleasurable, right? And pleasurable includes feeling good about what you eat too, right? So it's not just a matter of scarfing down stuff that in the moment feels good and then leaves you feeling sick, right? So you want your eating to be a source of well-being for you. And so that's what Blissipline is. It's right here and right now enjoyment. With the support, with the understanding it's going to help us create a marvelous life. So it's not an either or thing, it's a both and thing. So, with respect to money and work, this is way beyond the scope of one video, like way. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a little intro, but remember, my beautiful friends, practicing is how you make this your own. If you just sit and listen to Mary blather on, no matter how amusing you might find me, it doesn't really change your life. What changes your life is practicing. So we will continue to contextualize this in practicing. Oh, and one person asked a question yesterday. So when do we do this? And my answer was basically like all the time. And if you watched the second video on how trauma impacts the capacity to choose from love or fear, I gave an example of getting up in the morning and feeling this sort of like urgency, like, and then stopping and saying, hold on, is this real urgency or is this false urgency? Am I choosing from love or fear? And seeing how fear is sort of this background noise, and that it must be recognized before we can make another choice. Like, oh, wow, fear. Okay, got it. So if you haven't watched video 2, it's probably a good one to watch. All right, so video 3. Since you were a tiny child, people have done a number on you on this topic of work and money. Since you were a tiny child, it's not really a question of blaming them because they didn't know any better. So blaming them isn't helpful, but let's acknowledge what was done, right? So, if someone's car swerves out of control and hits you, you can blame them, but it might not be that they had the capacity to control it in that moment and you're still hurt. So I just want to separate the blame from the injury. Blame, it's okay. It's better than many things, but it gets you stuck. But acknowledging the injury, this is the starting point. The injury has happened. So whether or not someone can be blamed, the injury is here, we need to address it, okay? And I really want to try and keep it that clean. Leave blame off to the side. You can explore that another day. So a number was done on you on money, and a number was done on you from work, around work. And if you were lucky, you had positive messages on both those things that allowed you to perceive your own sovereignty, your own capacity to choose, your own capacity to re-choose later as you grew older and knew more, and your own capacity to take a challenging situation and apply your skill and your intellect and everything else. But for many people, what was taught to us was very, 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 very fear-based on both those accounts. So you got to study, so you get a good job, and you got to get a good job so that you have enough money so that you can do this. And so left out of there mostly are a few things. One is you don't know what you know till you know it, and so you do something, and that's when you discover what it's really like. So someone says to you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you say, oh, I wanted to be an astronaut. And then I studied physics in college, and I realized that I didn't have the chops because I had never really learned to study. So I didn't have the chops to study physics. All I thought about being an astronaut was going out to space. So you don't know till you know. And so we have to give permission to ourselves to discover as we go along, and to discover we were wrong. We didn't want to do that. I have a very beautiful friend, Daniel, who is a doctor, and his dad's a doctor, and his brother's a doctor. He comes from a line of doctors, and he's also a wonderful oboe player, and that's how I know him. But he was a doctor. I mean, he's still technically, as I suppose. I don't really know what he's doing at this point, but he had won some big grant through NIH, National Institute of Health, to research some very important stuff about treating certain communicable diseases. And he won all kinds of awards because his research was important and good. So he was very immersed in this life. And at some point we were talking, and at the time he was in his 40s, I believe. And he said, I never really wanted to be a doctor. I don't want to be a doctor anymore. He was good at it, so he kept going. It was the family business, so he kept going. He got awards, so he kept going. He made good money, so he kept going. And it wasn't until he was old enough to make a new choice that he said, I don't want to do this anymore. So lucky that he had sufficient empowerment to do that and go try something else. So this is the truth for people, is that we don't know what we know until we know it. So we have to give ourselves permission to discover along the way. The other thing is that, or another thing is that we might have a limited amount of time we want to do something. My limit seems to be about 10 years on each career so far, and 10, 15, 12, something like that. And then I'm really, really ready for some changes. And you might be like that, and you might not be like that. But again, Blissipline is a highly individual matter. So that's one way that we need to reclaim our sovereignty with respect to work. Another way we need to reclaim our sovereignty with respect to work is that we also have been trained to be obedient. And obedience is very, very helpful if you're trying to have a big system and have people be cogs within it, Very, very helpful. If you're trying to run a big corporation, you want people to do what they're told. And there are probably places where you personally might be able to follow instructions and be obedient and be happy, possibly. But for most of us, there is a real stripping away of our sense of sovereignty at work. And some people are in humiliating situations. Some people are in exhausting situations. I was in the field of independent documentary filmmaking, social issue documentary filmmaking, and there's a real feeling in there, we've got to save the world, And that feeling was used to exploit people to work really crazy hours. So a lot of times what is perceived as, important can be used to force you to disregard your own well-being. So a lot of work environments will push you towards disregarding your own well-being. And then there's all the stories that are in your head, like the economy's bad and there aren't many jobs, or there are many jobs, or we can't find employees, or we can't find employees, or the minimum wage is too much, the minimum wage is too little. All these stories bombarding your mind all the time. So this is what really there are many, many things like this that make work very complicated for people. So to cut through all of this, we can use the question, with regard to my work today in this moment, am I choosing from love or fear? And again, very often you're going to find the answer is fear. Like, I don't want to get fired. I don't want to piss my boss off. I don't want to be late. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to, lose my home. Fear. Now, we don't immediately, as I said in the other thing, say, okay, great. Well, so I have to go do this thing. How am I going to love that? It's not a binary thing. We say, okay, got it. Always first. Okay, got it. We want to bring compassion to ourselves in the moment, because that is how we will move toward our own empowerment. If we do not bring compassion to ourselves in the moment, we will not move towards our own empowerment. Carl Rogers said this really well. He said, the curious paradox, meaning it's curious, it's strange, and it's a paradox. It seems to contradict itself. The weird contradiction, the curious paradox, is that when I accept myself just as I am, and I really, okay, this is how I am. This is how I am, perhaps with a healthy dose of fuck it, this is how I am. The curious paradox, is when I accept myself just as I am, then I change. But that change cannot happen without the acceptance, okay? So if we're choosing from fear a lot, we say, okay, got it. Okay, got it. Okay, got it. And this work is tricky, because the more we see ourselves choosing from fear, the more frustrated we might find ourselves feeling. However, it is the doorway. Say, okay, got it. Then after settling, we ask the question, as I've said before, as a question, we'd live the question. Okay, if I were choosing from love, what would I choose? And then we stay open to that. We stay open to that and we ask it again and again and again. And maybe over the course of a day or a week or a month, we begin to see, you know what? There are some places I could implement some changes here that would make my life better. And maybe meanwhile, I start looking for something else that I can do that I will love. So what we do is we open ourselves up to beginning to be guided by love. That's a very important aspect of this love or fear thing. Okay. Now, if you don't have fear, you're fine. These are always, these are always weighted towards addressing the fear. But many, many, many people have a fear relationship with their work. Okay. Now, let's jump to money. Obviously, these are connected for almost everybody because what you do determines how much money you have. And this may or may not be actually true for you if you really put your mind to changing this, to breaking that connection, but it certainly feels very, very true to most people. Many people feel, well, I'm really limited because, and then they will say things like, I'd have to get another job, or I have to take a second job, or I don't want to work 2 jobs, and so there's a very powerful scarcity relationship that connects money to work in this way. Now, it's not that these things aren't true. They might be objectively accurate. However, when we come to these things from the viewpoint of fear, we have a very limited capacity to think creatively. We have a very limited capacity to perceive other opportunities. Confirmation bias will make sure that we continue to see the limitations that we believe in. Let me say that again, in case you don't understand that. We'll go over this a few thousand times. Confirmation bias will make sure that we continue to see the limitations we believe in, whether or not other data comes in. Okay, so confirmation bias is very important in this. So with the love or fear question, we begin to say, okay, I see myself choosing from fear. Okay, got it. Oh, I'd have to take a second job to have more money. Okay, got it. I'd have to sell a kidney. Okay, got it. I see the fear. Okay, got it. Stop, settle. If I were choosing from love, what would I choose? What would I choose? And not only if you stay open to this question, will you have good ideas like, ooh, you know what? In addition, you will stumble upon things. And this is partly because of confirmation bias and partly because of the mystical nature of synchronicity, whatever synchronicity really is. Synchronicities occur when we are open to things we want. And then synchronicities occur. They just do. You will see it happen. I've never seen anybody not have this happen when they start coming from love. Part of the explanation is confirmation bias. Literally that. You cannot see the positive thing in front of you when you are believing only in the negative. It can be right there and your brain will filter it out because that's what confirmation bias does. Okay? So we ask the question, if I were choosing from love, what would I choose? And we begin to think suddenly, and we start to remember something we'd forgotten about that we want. So we can begin to separate the work question and the money question from one another by treating them both as opportunities to practice love rather than fear, to an opportunity to practice love. And the thing is, in this new world, they really are separate. There are so many ways to bring money into your life that are distinct from this sort of get a job, stay with it for 30 years paradigm that used to be the norm. Not for very long, by the way. That paradigm was only the norm for like 60 years or something. It's not like human nature. You know what I mean? We got convinced this is normal, but it was just created by the Industrial Revolution. You know what I'm saying? Even the 40-hour work week was fought hard for by people who had been working hundreds of hours. And the powers that be will still try and get us to work more hours than we want to. So what is considered normal is just an agreement. It's just an agreement. And often it was one we did not enter into on purpose. We were told this is normal, and we're like, oh, okay. So there's our agreement, right? So, so we're breaking up the paradigm by asking the questions about love and fear. And the more we can come from love in any moment, on any topic, the more we will begin to discover possibilities that are invisible to us until we come from love. That's just confirmation bias. Does that make sense to you? So, practice. Okay, so just bringing it back to practice. We're already at 24 minutes here, but whatever. So, whatever I said that resonated for you, great. Now, what you must do is claim your own sovereignty in this circumstance and say, okay, so in this situation, you might not even have to ask, am I choosing from love or fear? You can feel the fear. You know, oh, I feel fear. Okay, got it. I feel anxious. I feel concerned. I feel worry. Go back to video 1, all those things on the end of fear. I feel ashamed. I feel embarrassed. I feel judged. I feel like I want to hide. Fear, all fear, right? In this situation, I can feel I'm coming from fear. Okay, got it. Okay, got it. Give yourself the grace of, okay, got it. I came by this honorably. Of course you feel that way. All the things we've been working on. Okay, got it. So if I were, and if you can't say choosing from love, you can say able to begin to think about choosing from love. You can soften it all you want. If I were able, man, if I could get myself able to think about this from a loving viewpoint, from a hopeful viewpoint, from a curious viewpoint, you can use any of the words on that end of the spectrum. What would I do? And then you sit with the question. Let yourself have that grace. And the mind might come up with something right away. It might be like, oh, I know. Great. But it might not. But what you've done is you've opened the door. You've literally changed a setting in your reticular activating system of your brain, the RAS that helps the confirmation bias be sure and filter out the data for you, right? You've literally changed a setting in your brain, and you have said to your brain, I would like information on how this could work out in a way that would feel good to me. You've asked your brain to do that. Instead of saying, this can't work, and then your brain filters out all the information about how it could work because that was an instruction. You see? So even just as you say, if I were choosing from love, what would I choose? You asked your brain to start sifting for the data that will serve you. You understand? Okay. You know, for me, this is part neuroscience and part mystical because there is also that synchronicity. You have also put yourself in alignment with the synchronicity. For me, the two are just different manifestations of the great mystery that is life. For me, there's no separation, really. It's obvious to me that there's no sort of like spiritual truth that isn't true in the real world. It's like, no, it's a continuum. It's all a continuum. And, you know, physics has begun to confirm this. Much as I didn't finish my physics degree, I never stopped being interested in it. So quantum physics has shown us again and again and again the limitations of our thinking when it comes to perceiving reality. So whether you're approaching it from a neuroscience point of view or from a more like universal spiritual point of view, doesn't matter. Just follow what works for you to support your capacity to connect with new possibilities and your own sovereignty. I am the boss of me. I get to do this. I am the boss of me. I get to make choices. I'm the boss of me. I get to create a life that is wonderful. I am the boss of me. I get to change my biases. I am the boss of me. I get to choose to believe there is a way that this could work out. Reclaiming your sovereignty. All right. Let me know what you think. Have a wonderful day.